So this is 6.1a in trigonometry, new chapter, inverse circular functions. And this is going to be some way new stuff. And I am not going to go into excessive detail in all of this. I just want you to get a basic understanding of what's going on here. So what we're doing is let me get a different color here. Let's go with a dark blue. We are taking our sine wave and we're looking to see if it is what is called a one-to-one relation. And if you remember, in order to determine that, we did horizontal line tests. And if this horizontal line crossed our graph at more than one point, it was not a one-to-one relationship. But if we make the determination to make this graph only go from here to here, then this part of the graph is a one-to-one relationship because our lines do not cross our graph at more than one place. Whereas if we, let's get a different color here and a thicker line, that might help. If we drew a line through here, see how it crosses there and there. But if we draw that line through this blue part, and we only looked at the blue part, it only crosses through there once. So we're going to say that it's one-to-one between here and here. So x, or pi over 2 and pi over negative 2. So we're going to use that as our interval. So we're going to look at that right there. That's our restricted domain. That's what the possibility, remember domain and range. Domain is the amount of numbers on the x-axis. The range is how high up or down it can go on the y-axis. So what this represents, the numbers it can be x. It can go no further left than this, no further right than that. So that's our interval, that's our domain. And our y value, our range, would be how high up or down. And see, they're giving us a domain of negative pi over 2, pi over 2. And the range then is going to be negative 1, positive 1. It doesn't go any further down than 1, no further up than positive 1. So the range is my y values. The x is, or the domain is, or my x values. What numbers are possible for my x values to be? What numbers are possible for my y values to be? Alright, so that is that picture right there. Now, what they're talking about doing is an inverse function. So what they're going to do is they're going to take, and let me make my pen a little bit smaller here, the y equals x, which is this 45-degree angle that goes through here, and they're going to flip this thing across that line. So they're going to take this sine wave and flip it across the line. And when they do that, let me get this out of the way. Get some of this out of the way. Alright, let's look and see what it does when we flip it. Okay, so that's with it flipped across that 45-degree angled line there. And that's our inverse. And what happens is our inverse then looks like this. So before we have this line, y equals sine of x, and now we have y equals the sine of negative 1 of x, which that negative 1 means the inverse. It does not mean anything other than that. And another way of saying sine of negative 1 is arc sine of x. And some of you may have heard me say that before. And basically what you're doing, when they give it to you as the sine of negative 1 or the arc sine, they're asking you for the angle. So before, when I'd have an angle in a triangle, and I'd say, what's the sine of 30 degrees if this were 30? You'd put that into your calculator and it would give you a number. Now we're giving you the number and you're pushing the sine of negative 1 to find out what that angle is that number represents. So it's going backwards. So if you have sine of 30 degrees and you plug that into your calculator and you get 0.5. If you put 0.5 in your calculator and hit arc sine, which would be your inverse, it's going to give you, so sine -1 of 0.5 is going to give you 30 degrees. So what you're doing is when you have this -1 up here, that means they're asking for the decimal, and then that'll give you your angle. Whereas up here, you're given your angle and you just push sine, it will give you your decimal or your ratio. So we're just going the other way. So hopefully that will help you understand a little bit about what's going on here. And I really wouldn't get too carried away with understanding all of this graph stuff. I would like you to understand that page 237, Summary of Inverse Function, I'm interested in number 5, to find the inverse of x, f of -1 of x, from f of x. So what we're doing, let's just go ahead and put one of those up here. Let's get rid of this and this. Alright, so if they give you something like, and let me flip through some pages here and kind of find what I'm looking for. Oh, here it is right here. Duh. Okay, so we'll put that up there. And this is true with sine, cosine, tangent, all of them. If we are given this here, which is the same as this, it's just we write arc sine instead of sine to -1, that's the only difference. It means that x equals the sine of y. It means we just flipped it around. So let's put some real life things in here. If I have y equals the sine -1 of 0.50, that is the same thing as 0.50 equals the sine of y. Okay? So let me, instead of a y, let me put a degree in here. 30 degrees equals the sine -1 of 0.5, the arc sine. So if you take your calculator and you put in 0.5 and then hit the sine of -1 button, it will give you a 30 degree. Just like if you take the sine of 30 degrees, punch it in, it will give you that. So it's just going backwards. And that'll be the same again with cosine and tangent and all the other trig functions. So if they give you, like example 1, y equals the arc sine of 1/2. Alright, what we're going to do is we're just going to rewrite this. Instead of writing it as that, well, I guess you could. You could write y equals sine -1 of 1/2. So put 1/2 in your calculator, hit your arc sine button, and it will give you a y value. And the problem is sometimes it will give you a y value of 30 degrees, but if they want it in radians, which they will, you're going to have to know that 30 degrees is pi over 6. So you can do this with a calculator. You don't even need a calculator. You just know from memory what those are going to be. Alright, so let's look at example 1, part B. Y equals sine -1 of -1. And if we rewrite it this way, it's going to say that -1 equals the sine of y. Okay, so those are saying the exact same thing. It's just when it's in this format, you can find out what that angle is. So again, you put -1 in your calculator, and you hit arc sine, which I'm trying to do that and talk at the same time, and I get for an answer -90. Well, I need to change that into radians, so that'll be -pi over 2 will be your answer there. Letter C says y equals the sine of -1 of -2. So again, I'm just going to put in my 2 negative arc sine. And the problem is that gives me an error. Why does that give me an error? Well, it gives me an error because I'm using -2 as my x value, and -2 does not, or arc sine of -2 does not exist because it is not in the domain of the inverse sine function. If I look at my xy axis, remember it gave me pi over 2 and pi over 2. It has to be between there, and the number 2 is not there when I'm doing my regular sine function. When I do my inverse and I flip it up, if you look at the top of page 238, what is the furthest to the left and right I can go? I can go to -1 to the left and +1 to the right, but that's as far as I can go. And they're asking me to find -2. So -2 does not exist, and you should have gotten an error on your calculator for that. So that's video 6.1a, and we'll go to 6.1b.